The crew of the celestial venture was nearing the end of their long exploratory mission. They had mapped distant star systems, charted barren planets, and sent back valuable data to Earth. Their final task was to survey a small, obscure planet on the edge of a nearby solar system, designated X-17. Officially, X-17 had been flagged as unremarkable, an Earth-like atmosphere, but with no known life or resources worth exploiting. But as they approached the planet's surface, the crew's instruments began to pick up something that none of their briefings had prepared them for: a human settlement. Confused and cautious, they descended to investigate what appeared to be a fully built colony in the middle of nowhere. What they were about to uncover would challenge their understanding of reality and force them to confront the mysteries of a place that never should have existed. The descent to X-17 was smooth, the planet's atmosphere stable and calm. As the celestial venture lowered through the thin cloud cover, the crew got their first view of the surface. Rolling hills, patches of dense forest, and winding rivers spread out below them. Everything looked normal for an uninhabited planet, but then, as they flew lower, they saw it, an unmistakable human town. It was nestled between two large hills, its streets laid out in neat grids, and buildings constructed from familiar materials. The town looked old, as if it had been there for decades. There were houses, shops, even a central square with a clock tower. However, there was no sign of life, no movement, no people, no vehicles. The place was completely abandoned. "This isn't possible," one of the astronauts muttered, staring at the settlement below. "There are no records of a human colony here. This place doesn't exist." The captain, their minds spinning with questions, ordered the crew to prepare for landing. Whatever this town was, they needed to find out how it came to be and why no one knew about it. This celestial venture touched down a few kilometers from the town. The crew, equipped with their suits and communication devices, cautiously approached on foot. As they entered the outskirts, they were struck by how eerily pristine everything looked. The buildings were intact, with windows unbroken and doors closed, as if waiting for someone to return. The streets were covered in a thin layer of dust, but otherwise there were no signs of wear or decay. It was as if the town had been frozen in time. The astronauts split into teams, each assigned to investigate different parts of the settlement. One group headed toward the residential area, where houses stood silent, their windows like empty eyes watching the intruders. Another team moved toward the center, where the clock tower loomed over the town square. The last group stayed on the outskirts, scanning the area for any clues about the town's origin. As the hours passed, one thing became clear. Nothing about this place made sense. The houses were fully furnished, with personal belongings left behind, as though their occupants had simply vanished. Tables were set for meals that had never been eaten. Beds were made, yet no one had slept in them for years. And despite the passage of time, everything seemed to have been preserved in an unexplainable stasis. The captain's voice crackled over the comms. "There's something deeply wrong here. We need to regroup." But as they gathered in the town square, a strange feeling began to settle over them, a sensation of being watched. The air grew heavy, and a low hum seemed to vibrate through the ground. Then, the first figure appeared. One of the astronauts froze as a shadowy figure crossed the street ahead of them, a quick blur in the corner of their eye. They turned, trying to focus on the movement, but it was gone. "I saw something," they said into the comms, their voice uneasy. There was someone, or something, just there. The others scanned their surroundings, but there was nothing. The streets remained still, the houses quiet. Yet the unsettling feeling of being watched persisted. "We need to get out of here," another astronaut said, their tone tight with fear. "This place isn't right." But just as they turned to head back toward their ship, another figure appeared. This time it was clearer, a shadowy form standing at the edge of the square watching them. It was humanoid, but its features were indistinct, as though it existed somewhere between reality and a dream. Then, in a blink, it was gone. The crew hurriedly made their way back to the outskirts of the town, but the figures seemed to multiply, flickering in and out of sight, always just on the edge of perception. They were surrounded by phantoms of a colony that had never been. Back on board the celestial venture, the crew tried to piece together what had happened. The town clearly wasn't just an abandoned settlement. It was something else, something not quite real. The figures they had seen weren't living beings, but neither were they simple illusions. "We have to leave," the captain said, their voice filled with urgency. "This place isn't just strange, it's dangerous." They initiated takeoff procedures, but as they ascended, the ship's systems began to fail. Instruments flickered, navigation controls locked, and the engines sputtered. The planet, or something on it, it, wasn't letting them go. The ship lurched, forced back down to the surface. The astronauts were trapped. "We're not leaving," one astronaut whispered, dread settling in. "We're part of it now." The crew was forced to return to the ghost town. As they stepped outside, the air felt thicker, the light dimmer. The town itself seemed to shift subtly, the buildings leaning at odd angles, the streets warping as if the very fabric of reality was coming undone. One by one, the crew started seeing flashes of a different time. In these visions, the town was alive. People walked the streets, children played in the square, and the shops bustled with activity. But these moments were brief, flickering before their eyes like old film reels. It became clear. The town existed in two states at once. One of the past, where its inhabitants had thrived, and one of the present, where nothing remained but shadow. In the town square, where the clock tower stood frozen at midnight, the crew found an ancient, weathered terminal. It was out of place among the old buildings, its design far more advanced than anything the town should have had. One of the astronauts managed to power it up, and as the screen flickered to life, a series of logs appeared. The logs were written by a group of human settlers who had arrived on X-17 many decades ago. They had come to the planet to build a new colony, to escape the chaos back on Earth. But the planet wasn't as empty as they thought. An alien presence, invisible and intangible, had already claimed it. The settlers had discovered too late that the planet was out of sync with time and space. The alien entity that inhabited X-17 had the ability to warp reality, to trap those who entered its domain in an endless cycle. The town had become a phantom, existing in both the past and present, its people caught in a loop of existence and non-existence. The settlers had tried to leave, but like the crew of the celestial venture, they were trapped. Over time, they had faded into the shadows, becoming the very phantoms the astronauts had seen. "We're part of it now," one astronaut said, reading the final log entry aloud. "There's no escape. We will live in the memory of this town forever." With the truth revealed, the crew realized their fate was sealed. The town had claimed them, just as it had claimed the settlers before them. The figures they had seen were not ghosts of the past, but echoes of those who had tried and failed to leave. The astronauts returned to the ship, but it was useless. No matter how many times they tried to break free, they would always return to the town square, standing beneath the frozen clock tower, caught in the same loop. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, but time no longer held meaning. The crew of the celestial venture became part of the colony's endless cycle, their memories of a life beyond X-17 fading as they too became shadows. And so the phantom colony continued its existence, a town that never should have been, on a planet that trapped all who dared to enter. The crew had joined the settlers in their eternal, silent march, caught between worlds, in a town that never truly existed.